Okay then, another big card of Highland League action coming up this weekend. I mean, it's pretty easy to work out what the pick of the games is and what will be the Highland League Weekly big game, isn't it? Devon Vale Lossy. No, Buckie Thistle against Fraserburgh. Of course, last year's champions at last year's runners-up.
Say it again, Ryan. Say it again.
Is this going to be one of those marker games 2 weeks into the season where we find out which one's going to be the top dog?
I hope so.
No,
it's very early days. Two teams who have managers who probably feel they could have played better in the opening weekend of the season, but they both know if you get 3 points on Saturday, you're already off to a very good start, and it's as ever same as last year. It's putting pressure on a beaten rival if you can pick up the 3 points.
I think that these head-to-heads, and I mean there's far more teams than just Fraserburgh and Buckie that will be involved in the title shake-up in my opinion, but these head-to-heads, despite what people might say, are always important. Even, I mean, nothing's decided this weekend, but even if you think back to last season and how tight it was, Buckie played Fraserburgh in August at Victoria Park and they were leading 2-1 and Paul Campbell scored in the last minute for Fraserburgh to get a draw, and that's a 3-point swing in terms of Buckie dropped 2 points there. Fraserburgh gained one with that late goal, and if I'm not mistaken the margin of victory when it came to the end of the season was 3 points in Fraserburgh's favour. So I mean you could look back at countless instances over a season and go, that was a difference maker, but that's just an example of any results you can get against your direct rivals are always helpful, I think.
To use the golfer's analogy, you can't win a tournament in the first couple of rounds, but you can certainly play your way out of it.
No, that's not quite as relevant to football, is it? Ryan Cowie is among the Brock players that are currently still out. Are we expecting him to be back this weekend?
Unlikely, I gather he's maybe. And the thing is as well, it's a big game to come back into if you've missed part of pre-season. I'm sure Ryan would be well up for it, knowing what he's like. But if you're not quite there, it's a big ask to come straight back in.
If you're Brora, hosting Turriff, Breedon at Forest Mechanics, other teams as well, like for Martin playing Strathspey, Inverurie, Banks of Dee meeting each other. Maybe not so much the latter one, but the first three, are they just hoping for a Buckie Fraserburgh draw so they can nudge ahead with a victory?
Well, the professionalism amongst those managers, they'll tell you right now that they won't even be looking at the score in that game because
they're all lying.
or the table.
Everyone I hope you're listening now.
Or all their interest in is their own game. But there's a couple of interesting ones there. I mean, Breedon up at Forest, I think they only last season took a late goal to win at Mossett Park. I think Forest are probably in a better place this season than they were then. So I wouldn't just be completely surprised if Forest took something out of that game. Turriff, no, they'll be underdogs going up to Dudgeon Park. But again, good start. Can you go and cause a bit of a surprise? And I mean, Inverurie and Banks of Dee, that's a sort of one where it's maybe a toss of a coin job, really, I would say.
Yeah, a game we've seen multiple times, I think, in the Aberdeenshire tournaments over the last few years. Be a statement for Banks of Dee, wouldn't it, to go there and win?
Banks of Dee, I think actually in recent meetings have probably had slightly the better of it, but we'll see. I mean, they're hoping to have a couple of guys back. I know Neil Gold and Mark Young, who were unavailable last weekend, should both be available, so that maybe make a wee difference to them. And I'm sure Mr. Gold will maybe have I feel he's got a point to prove returning to his old stomping ground, Harlow Park.
That's the interesting thing for me, that game this weekend, because Banks of Dee were playing a new opponent in many respects for their Highland League debut in Nairn. That's not a game they would have played very often other than a pre-season friendly.
Well, Scottish Cup last
week.
There you go. But even then, saying that, it was like a new opponent because Nairn, between injuries last season and new signings, there was only 2 starters for that game last year that played last Saturday. So it was, you're right in what you're saying, Thirdy, is the point I'm getting at.
First time for everything.
So last week's Friday preview show, we were accused of not giving enough coverage to Keith, who they had to wick this weekend. A big drive for Keith. Again, another one of these games where we praised them on Monday for their goalkeeping performance, but maybe not necessarily the rest of their performance. But if they could go up there and put in a performance and even get a point, that would be some return, wouldn't it?
Remember, Wick were the draw specialists.
They were also looked strong last week as well.
I mean, it's a different challenge, is it, for both the teams, I think, because Wick and Keith playing Buckie and Rhoda respectively, your first sort of things, try and stay in the game as long as you can. You know you're going to have to soak up probably reasonably long spells of pressure, and you're probably playing on the counter-attack a fair bit. Whereas in this game, I think both of them you sort of feel you should be going and imposing yourself and trying to dominate. And I mean, at Harmsworth Park, the slope can always play a factor as well. Who can make the best use of playing with the slope? But
peculiarity of the Highland League, that, isn't it?
But Gary Manson said to me as well, sometimes he feels Wick actually play better when they play up the slope. So there's another peculiarity for you, but that'll be interesting to see who can come out on top. Okay,
hopefully that was enough, Keith. Coverage. In terms of the games we've got left then, Devon Vale, Lossiemouth. I don't think Devon Vale would have been happy with how they played against Fraserburgh week 1. I think we said that on Monday.
Well, yeah, they struggled. They just couldn't really test Joe Barber at all in the Broch goal. So that's the first obvious area they need to improve on this weekend. They need to get chances. Never mind putting the ball in the back of the net. Just get good chances to get off the mark and get going. And I know it's early. It's only the second week of the league season, but you need to get your campaign up and running. So it's a big game for Vale already.
I think from a Lossie perspective, you're talking about Devon Vale trying to improve in the final third. I think Lossie actually now, with the options they've got, actually quite potent in the final third, and it's maybe more at the back that they'll need to maybe tighten up a wee bit. But when there's like Ryan Facher, Martin Charlesworth, Fraser Forbes, Scott Miller, Ross Archibald, Ryan Stewart, there's a lot of options for Joe Russell in the final third. So I mean, wouldn't it be surprising to me if, although I'm maybe not expecting them to be up towards the top end of the table, I wouldn't be surprised if Lossie scored quite a lot of goals this season.
Martin Charlesworth obviously got off to a good start on the first weekend scoring. Okay, our second, we've got 2 more games left to discuss, but we'll talk about our second highlights game. First of all, Huntly against Clatticudden. Huntly, after their loss to Turriff in opening weekend, a disappointing loss. They'll be looking to bounce back from that. Clack as well. Both those sides, 2 of our ambitious kind of mid-tablers that want to maybe try, if it's this season maybe, or in the years ahead, breaking into that top pack. Who's going to come out top?
Well, if you're asking me for a prediction, I would probably predict draw, to be honest. But,
off the fence,
splinters and all that. But I think the thing is, it's 2 teams, as you sort of said there, that would be quite frustrated with how they started off. And for two sides that are ambitious, if there's a loser on Saturday, I know it's a long season, but it's quite a sort of disappointing beginning, really. When I always think, if you want to improve as well, a good start for these sort of sides, and the more points you can put on the board early, it gives you an awful boost and builds the confidence. Whereas if you sort of start with 2 defeats and things are going wrong for you, it can become a bit of a drag early on, and especially if you go on a run. I mean, again, it's early in the season, but if you start to go 3, 4, 5 weeks without winning, your main focus sort of becomes what's happening at the bottom, and it's more a season of self-preservation maybe rather than making much progress.
Neither manager wants to be looking at a double dint of defeats, I think, after 2 games.
So that's why you'd say draw.
The Highland League Weekly Anoraks will note that that's us getting to Christie Park in week 2 of the season. What week of the season was it last time we got there, Callum? It was pretty late. I think we were last.
It must have been week 20 something last season. It was between, well, we'd only have 1 camera, so we only do 1 game, but which is partly season, but I think we've postponed about 3 times of trying to go there.
Hopefully we've not tempted fate by being smug about it here. When will the James Anderson goal drought end? Paul, will it be this weekend?
It could be. Drought.
Drought. He's played one game so far, and that constitutes a drought.
No, of course, I'm joking, but he was, I think, among our. We joked on Monday about strikers scoring, who we thoroughly expected to score, but James Anderson didn't score, so maybe he'll get up and running.
The only way is up.
Yeah, one of our top Highland League hitmen. Right, near County Rothes. Rothes obviously lost a tight encounter at Breedon, but it sounded like they could have played better. Didn't really come into the game until the second half. So Ross Jack will want an improved performance this weekend at Nairn, but Nairn also showed what they could do against D.
I mean, the thing for Rothes is maybe if they have one or two players back, which we're not 100% sure about at this stage, but from what I hear, Greg Morrison might be out for a few more weeks yet, which is a blow because obviously Steve Mackay's in at Rothes, back to one of his old clubs on Saturday, but it's to ask him to play maybe as sort of a lone striker is quite an ask, I think, whereas if you have Greg with him, there would be quite a good partnership in my opinion. So if Greg's out, that's a blow to them, and likewise Fraser Robertson in midfields are just a really sort of bustling presence, does the basics well, and been a really good servant for Rothes over the last few years. So without those players, I would probably just fancy Nairn perhaps to sneak that one. I just think building on how they played against Banks of D, and with those options they've got in the forward line, I think you'd expect Nairn to score goals, so I might just be plumping for Nairn with that, I think.
And if that comes to fruition, who would have predicted Rothes with nil points after 2 games? That would be...
No, to be fair, it's not a particularly easy start, particularly given the circumstances we've spoken about, away to Breedon and then away to Nairn in your second weekend of the season.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't discount Sid Mackay's engine, because I saw him on Twitter saying that he was running 1 kilometre intervals in something like 3 minutes in recent days, and I tried doing that at the weekend for 1 kilometre. Didn't do it in 3 minutes, Paul. Anyway, that's your Friday preview show. As I mentioned, tune in Monday 7 p.m. at Press and Journal. Buckie Thistle against Fraserburgh is going to be our main game, so we'll have reaction as well as the highlights from that. We'll also have the highlights from Huntly against Clacknacuddin, so see you then.